Ideas come from nothing, right? It's an idea which you then put into an existence. But it's the community that it believes in this idea that builds anything and where value comes from. You know, if you look at major cities around the world, it was those individuals' ideas that believe in the city that built up that city. They went there because they believed in something, and they were part of that hive community that all believed in it, that built up New York, that built up Hong Kong, that built up San Francisco, that built up certain areas. And so today, what's being built up, you can't necessarily see in the same physical realm. What they're building is something in this digital realm. However, it's as big, if not bigger, and more powerful than what's been done in the past.
Communities are fluid and flexible. So you aren't creating this kind of static insider outsider problem. You're saying anybody who has self-determined interest in this system is willing to put in whatever is required to enter it, whether that's some time, sweat equity or time, or whether it's being a token holder, whatever it might be. Ideally, the barriers to entry are not super high. They have the ability to participate in these governance systems. I've been thinking a lot over my entire career, the past 15 years or so, particularly about other systems of governance besides our very top-down hierarchical, formally bounded structures. Tribal governance, how tribes and native organizations come together, panchayat organizations in ancient India and Mesopotamia. How you thought about decision-making in environments where you really were interested, not in kind of a top-down decision-making model, but you were interested really in stakeholder engagement. How do we expand the traditional shareholder extraction model to something that's more about engaging stakeholders as appropriate? Stakeholders include everything from workers at a company to users of a product of that company to suppliers, to vendors, whatever it might be. Like everybody in the ecosystem can have stake. They're stakeholders. How do you appropriately represent those interests within your governance system? Well, DAOs are one model where you could actually do that. There are other models as well, decentralized governance. But I think the critical point to take away is that there are models that empower and enable engagement across your entire ecosystem in ways that our current systems of corporate governance really just don't contemplate.
DAOs are pushing the envelope of corporate organization and community organization and nonprofit organization and even political organization. And what I think is important about DAOs is that they create a technical baseline of establishing trust so that people can transparently understand how organization is formed, and they can transparently see how an organization is making its decisions, and finally the outcome of those decisions. That's DAOs at their best. And yet, what I think we're already seeing is that DAOs very much in embracing technology and forming through, let's say, next generation technology. The truth is that they still require a lot of thought and process from humans in order for them to function properly and ethically. And so think of DAOs mostly as a catalyst to thinking more about social innovation and outcomes that we all want. So the process right now that we're in of creating DAOs and automating their activity is now starting to present ourselves with questions around how, as a community that's coming in a DAO, what types of values do we actually have? And it's pushing us to not only define those preemptively, but also to maintain them in an open and transparent way. That's a fundamentally different approach than how, let's say, corporations are set up, because there's a tremendous amount of privacy and secrecy and protection that's afforded to corporations. DAOs are almost like the complete opposite of all of that. They're instead putting everything out on the table and allowing for the greatest amount of disclosure possible in order to make them work.
MakerDAO, to me, is one of the most important ones and one of the oldest ones. It is the organization that works on the DAI stablecoin. And, I used to work for the Maker Foundation, which was tasked with building the Maker protocol and the MakerDAO. And now the foundation is gone. It doesn't exist anymore. They closed it, I think last month, which was always the case. And the idea was to people who worked for the foundation and got paid via the foundation now get paid via the DAO. So they had to present to the community working groups and ideas on what to build, and the community had to vote either yes or no. So that is, to me, one of the most successful DAOs that there is. Moloch DAO, really quickly, was a DAO that was formed in early 2019 by Amin Soleimani and a couple of others. I was a founding member. We were at the bottom of the bear market. It was crazy, bad times. A lot of people were not motivated at all. And this was a way to gather interested community members and pull in some funds. And that, was the seed that birthed hundreds of DAOs, I would say. Meta Cartel came out of Moloch. Well, because Peter Pan was not voted in, so he created Meta Cartel. Meta Cartel became Meta Cartel Ventures, then there was the Lao, then you have the artistic DAOs. A lot of that can be traced back to Moloch. Very lucky to be part of Pleaser DAO, which started just as a group of friends during one weekend where we wanted to buy a specific NFT. And we managed to do it. And then the second one we bought was the Snowden NFT for, I don't even remember, something like 2,200 ETH. At the time, it was probably $5-6 million. One of the most important NFT purchases of all time, if I may say. And specifically, those they also had the same, the same idea we had. That cypherpunk privacy. Everybody's deserving of their privacy, but also we're deserving of transparency that Snowden always talks about. And the money went to the Freedom of Press Foundation. That's one of the things that I like the most about the NFT scene. Plus, the NFT was beautiful as well. It's you got that art component mixed with the cypherpunk component.
There's an additional power dynamic that I think is not just monopoly power, but also financial power that DAOs have enabled in a couple of use cases. We've seen this in, for example, art sales where DAOs can co-own particular types of NFTs, right? And other kinds of important information. But in a way, there's also a degree of publicness, openness when it comes to the NFT movement as one example, where despite the NFT being owned by a few or a group, if it's owned by a DAO, you can also still have access to that piece of art for the public. I think there's a lot of people that normally wouldn't participate or donate to a nonprofit that ended up participating because that piece of art or what it represented really was special and meaningful to them. I think on the flip side, you had unprecedented ability of a nonprofit to fundraise that's doing such important work. And I spent some time in my career working on the nonprofit side. And so, fundraising is so hard. And I think the concept of DAOs, the concept of shared ownership is a whole nother way of not only awareness, ownership, crowdfunding, but also the ability of everyone to give a part of themselves, not just in saying that I donated to this cause or gave to this cause, but also owning a piece of that support, right? And so there is actual ownership in a way that blockchain and Web3 technology allows that I think people couldn't really tangibly possess when they donate to a crowdfunding campaign for a nonprofit. So I think it's definitely really, really interesting to think about NFTs being one sub-example, but what governance means, what it means to be part of a community, what it means to trust a community, because what it means to have mechanisms that allow for people to check the trust of each other, to have transparency, and to be able to participate at a global level, right?
People aren't really grasping the idea of a network of DAOs. So there will be DAOs that will just be made up of other DAOs. So the members of a DAO are just other DAOs, and it's just turtles all the way down. And you get this explosion. So you can think of it as like a meta holdings company. And you as an individual may be involved in several of these DAOs, and these DAOs are all networked together. So we're looking, when you look at social media right now in Web 2.0, it's a single player game. And there's this extra dimension and a lens when you compare it to Web 3, where you can actually conceive of Web 3 as a multiplayer game or a co-op game. And so in Web 2, it's all about, okay, in social media, how many likes, how many follows that I can get? Am I winning the game? Whereas in Web 3, with DAO-based structures, you're thinking of it more as a collective. You know, how do we help each other out? And it becomes this co-op game, and you can imagine a future of a bunch of these networks together. So a DAO may have a token, another DAO may hold that token. These DAOs will hold each other's token, and that will be considered a form of partnership, but it's not bound by legal documentation. It's bound by holding each other's token. And if something were to happen, instead of going to court and, you know, disengaging in this partnership, what you can do is just sell off the token. So it's a lot more fluid.